Today, we are talking about podcasting for your business with Stacy Heller. And we have another Stacy on with us as well, Stacy Harris. And between the two of them, we're going to see a really great presentation on podcasting and answer all of your questions. So please make sure you put your questions in Q&A, and we will get to them at the end of this presentation. We're going to go straight through. So Stacy, why don't you load up your presentation and let it go.
Okay. So here we go. I am looking forward to sharing this. So I am, as I mentioned, a native New Yorker. So that means two things. I can talk fast, and I am up to the challenge of getting all of this information in a very short period of time because there is a lot of information. So, welcome to Podcasting for Your Business. So, what to expect when you are expecting a BNI webinar? Well, we're going to give you a very quick intro to myself and Stacy Harris. We're going to talk about the numbers behind podcasts. We're going to talk about why you should podcast for your business. As Ross from Friends would say, pivot. We're going to talk about the technical aspects, record, edit, distribute. Stacy Harris will cover that, and how to make sure that you're not being a podcast poser. And then we'll do some quick top takeaways. So without further ado, as I mentioned, I am Stacy Heller. I am first and foremost a conversationalist, so much so that I actually had to start my own radio show because I like to joke that my mother never listened to me as a child. And so that is where I start first and foremost. The other thing I started to realize with my business is that I am a connector. I connect with other people through conversation. I connect with my clients. I connect my clients with their clients. It's what I do. And I do that through idea generation. You can read for yourself how I describe it. What the whole thing boils down to is that I find unique ways for clients to connect with their clients. And I do that through visuals or voice. And lately, the trajectory or pivot that my business has taken is into radio and podcasts. Then, Stacy Harris. Stacy, do you want to say a couple things about yourself?
Hi, I'm Stacy Harris. I am co-founder and managing director of Lens Group Media. We're based out of Seattle, Washington, but we have global clients. We support primarily podcast production, not exclusive to, but we have a long client list of podcast people dipping their toe into podcast, and everything from entrepreneurs through to Fortune 100 companies. So everyone we talk to is definitely interested in learning how they can actually utilize the podcast medium in order for them to get their message out to their customers. So really excited to join the conversation today.
Thank you for joining it. I appreciate it. Lens Group Media and Stacy Connects are frequent collaborators. So podcasts by the numbers, all of the numbers that are out there in studies, they all basically are saying that podcasts are becoming more and more popular, not just in terms of entertainment, but also in terms of what they can do for your business. So if you look at the one number here, about $1 billion is the amount that's projected to be spent by marketers on podcast ads by end of year this year. That is an enormous amount of money. The fact that there is almost 2 million estimated shows available, the number of people that are aware of podcasts is increasing, and people really, really enjoy podcasts. They listen to them, not just on their commute anymore. People are listening to them all the time in different ways, and they cover a wide range of genres, topics, interests. And so more and more it's becoming another way for people to connect with other people, which, as Stacy Connects, naturally big fan of that. So Stacy, do you want to add anything to this?
Just like, it's just another way for you to be able to connect with your audience. And so it's more dynamic. And I apologize, my cat just ran into the background. I'm like, Yeah, of course, I'm in a business call. She wants to make an appearance. Yeah, no, it's one of those things where if you're already in social media and doing blogs, this is just another way to elevate your message. And we really love this medium because it actually presents in first voice. And so your customers, you're able to connect with them with your real voice. And so it gives also an opportunity for them to kind of get who you are and why you're in the business that you're in from literally your own voice. So we feel like there's a that's definitely a powerful opportunity.
Absolutely. The other number that you should look at is this one that's down here, the number 1. There is only one subject matter expert about you, your business, and your why. So there may be a million lawyers out there, or a million therapists, or a million hairstylists. However, there's only one you, which sounds like a really bad pep talk, but it is true. And you have your own voice, and a podcast can help you share that voice. So, why should you podcast for your business? Well, I'm glad you asked. You didn't, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So, it's because of the competitive advantage and the client connection that you have. So, first, let's start with the client connection. It is a way to share your brand, your messaging, your business, as Stacy said, well, both of us said, in your voice. So that is a really important thing. Your voice is unique. Your outlook on your business is unique. How you approach things is unique, and you get to talk about that. Additionally, you have unique content. The things that you're talking about, the things that are important to you, the purpose behind your podcast, whether it's to educate people on something that you're passionate about, whether it's to introduce the world to you, your business, yourself, maybe it's just to entertain, or maybe it's to inspire. I work with several clients and they have different purposes behind their podcast. One of them is a psychotherapist. He's interested in using it as a lead generator for speaking engagements. Another one is an esthetician. She's looking to actually both educate and entertain people with her podcast, which, a plug, it comes out on Sunday and it's called Between Two Cheeks. Look for it. So it is a great medium where you can have something that is truly unique to your business. There's also dynamic engagement. It's a great way to connect with your target audience. You can have different ways that you do that, asking people what they want to hear, responding to them in fairly real time, having a way to connect with them where they can reach out to you on social media. You can have people on the show. You can do all kinds of things so that you have real dynamic engagement with people. There's also a huge impact on your business. You have increased organic SEO. It's a way that you can have your podcast on your website, and people go to your website, and now they're on your website and they're curious and they're looking around. Or perhaps it's the converse, and they're on your website and they're checking out your business. Well, now they find out that you actually have a podcast and they can listen to you talk about your business in your own voice. And suddenly that gives you a competitive advantage over other people, because now they have the opportunity to connect with you and to see what you're really about and to see if really they vibe with what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's also great for lead generation. And again, it's an introduction to your business, your services, or your products. It's also really a great way to revitalize your content. So, for instance, if you have a podcast, you can take the transcript and you can actually turn that into a blog post, which again is great for SEO. The whole idea of your website is to have multiple entrances into your house, if you will. And so having a podcast as one entry point and a blog as another entry point is a great way to organically increase your SEO. The other thing that you can do is you can take some of your FAQs that are sort of stagnant on your site, and you can turn those topics into podcast, or you can bring various aspects of your business or your page to life through podcasts. Stacy, anything you want to add? All right. So there are a couple of different podcast types that you may have. Typically, for a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, smaller businesses, your purpose is going to be probably more externally driven. you're going to do a podcast that's, again, about introducing people to your business, that is giving them information about your business, the services that you offer or provide, your why, etc. There's also that opportunity for engagement. It's a way to engage with people. We have a lawyer in our BNI group, which, by the way, I'm part of the Plateau Partners in Sammamish. Woot woot. And he is interested in the idea of doing a podcast about his business because typically he doesn't get that opportunity to come out behind his desk and really share the humor that he has, the stories that he has, and really bring his business to life so that people aren't painting him with a wide brush that often happens with professionals such as a lawyer. Let's face it. You can also have brand aligned messaging so that everything that you're doing is brand aligned. Now, that said, for instance, the podcast that we're working on for the esthetician, she owns and operates a very lovely salon. The podcast that she's doing is like the, let's call it, body cousin of her primary business. It's a way for her to have fun with the topic and to come in from a different angle. Again, you can showcase your products and services. You can have education about the things that you do, even share research that perhaps you have found from your experience. It's also, interestingly, a great way to recruit not just prospective clients, but thinking about coworkers, people that listen to the podcast and think, oh, I want to work with these people, or I want to be a part of this, which then leads to collaboration. There's also, frankly, just the entertainment factor. They're really fun and they can also be very inspiring. There's another podcast that I produce for a client who is telling a story of personal trauma, and she has turned it into a way to inspire other people to recognize that trauma doesn't define you, that it is really the story after the story that is where people want to be. So that is the primary type. Now, for maybe medium-sized to larger businesses, there's also internal audiences that you can think about podcasts for. Sharing your company values, your mission, your priorities, employee engagement. For instance, when you're onboarding people, especially with people that are remote, you can have a podcast series where it doesn't matter if you are in Jersey, or if you're in Washington, or if you're in India. You can have a podcast series that helps with employee engagement, the onboarding, sharing the company culture, the why, the story. You can also showcase internal programs. Perhaps you have a program for your BIPOC coworkers, or perhaps you have a program for the LGBT community. Perhaps you have different organizations that you want to highlight and let the entire company know about. It's an opportunity to do that. It's also great for learning, training, and development. Again, especially if you have people that are remote. Everybody gets the consistent same message in the voice of the people who are delivering that message. It brings it to life. Of course, customer stories and feedback, that's a great thing to share. Leadership messaging, and frankly, morale. It's a really great way to engage in a personal way that helps with morale. Stacy, want to add anything? All right. So there are common core elements in every podcast. So you want to think about your show theme. For instance, are you going to have a show that is about your business? Are you going to have something that is business adjacent? Or are you going to do something that is completely random and a passion project? What is the theme going to be about? I have a podcast called Don't Ask Me to Talk. As I said, my theme is my mother never let me talk as a child. And so now I'm going to buy an hour and I'm going to talk, and she can't interrupt me. So that's basically my theme. The format of it, whether it has a interview concept or whether it is just somebody talking for the entire period of time, whatever the format is, are there going to be breaks? Are there going to be people that are coming on? Thinking about that. And then audio branding, not just the music that you can have and the different elements, but even the tone. What tone are you going to have? Are you going to sound like you're doing a podcast with a voice of someone from like the Calm app? It's very calm and steady. Or are you going to have more personality and it's going to be a different vibe? So after you think about the forest, if you will, you want to move into the trees. So then you're going to break it down into the individual format for the episodes. So what is each show going to be like? For instance, for my show, I have 3 different elements. I have a part where I rant and talk about all of my stuff. And then I have a length. I know what my length is. It's an hour because frankly, I could talk for 5, but I can only afford 1. And you also want to think about the number of episodes that you're going to do and the cadence, which means how often are you going to release this? So is this something that is going to be a half an hour every week? Or is it going to be an hour once a month? What is it going to be? And so you need to think about not just what your audience can take in, but you also need to think about what are you able to produce? What can you, frankly, put out? You also need to think about the distribution. How are you going to distribute this? So you've created it. Awesome. You've got a podcast, you've got recordings, you've figured out all these other elements. Now, how are you going to get it out there? You want to think about your show script and the call to action. That's what CTA means. So when you do a podcast, you want a lot of calls to action. So you want to make sure that even if you don't have a sponsor, you can be your show's own sponsor, making sure that you give your listeners a way to engage with you and engage with the content. So it can be a call to action of, hey, what do you think about this conversation? Or, hey, make sure that you reach out and I'll send you a copy of my book. Or if you're interested in learning more, you can find me at, and you share your social media or your website, etc. So the call to action is really important, and working that into your show script so that there's consistency and people then know, okay, this is the podcast that I'm listening to. I recognize it. It has the same consistent script and call to action. And then lastly, you want to make sure that your content is evergreen. Unless you're going to do something and you're in it for the long term, you want the content to last. So what does that mean? Well, I can tell you because I live in the evergreen state. It means that it's constantly green, no deciduous trees. Those leaves don't fall off. That means that if you talk about, say, the spring training for baseball, you don't want to say last week, you want to say spring training 2021, so that in 2 years, if the content that you're talking about is relevant in 2 years because it's about your business, that way the timing is still relevant. And that's the important part with the evergreen material. Stacy, what'd I miss? All right. Nothing?
No, that was it really extending that shelf life as much as possible. You're not going to always be able to do that because there are going to be seasonal elements to your content, but wherever you can, that just elongates the opportunity for you to be able to share that content with your customers, and it doesn't appear outdated because it's still relevant.
Thank you for doubling down on that. It's super important. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the record, edit, and distribute tips. And Stacy Harris is going to take the lead on that because she is far more technical than I am. So take it away.
Thanks, Stacy. Are you able to, you'll be able to progress through the slides for me?
I will.
Great. So I'll just touch on this quickly. One of the questions that we get often is it goes everything from, don't I just press record and then stop and then post? That's certainly a strategy that you can take. However, if you just focus in on a couple of basics as it comes to your recording, you're going to create consistency for your audience to, as they experience your show. And so we always go with we go with, every time we talk to a host or a guest, we always say to them, hey, we've got some basics that we'd like for you to consider, and we'll definitely deal in post-production with whatever has been generated throughout the recording. However, we're going to try and create as much consistency as possible. So at the end of the day, we really just say use headphones or earbuds. And the reason for this is simply because, and and we recognize that not a lot of people actually like the way that maybe headphones or earbuds feel, or maybe if there is video involved, the way that that looks. However, this actually helps in the long run, both time and money, because this opportunity to wear headphones or earbuds allows a decrease in the feedback that you'll actually hear if you're doing say a Zoom call or an online recording. We want to make sure that there's an opportunity for each speaker to have a very clear recording, and what we don't want is the feedback from the other speakers coming through. So if you ever get a question from a guest that says, why do I need to wear these? That's what you can share with them. Hey, we just want to make sure that you come through loud and clear and we're not receiving any feedback as a part of the recording. We do recommend using an external mic. There are definitely a lot of great PCs and Macs out there with great, microphones that are included, but having that external mic just increases the opportunity for a higher sound quality, and it can actually be a cost-effective option. We do have recommendations for products that are easily accessible through the likes of Amazon, and there you go, Steve. Yeah, and Stacy has one too that we recommend. When you don't have to break the bank. If you want a $2,000 mic, go for it. There's a good chance that your listeners will actually hear your blood streaming through your veins, because those microphones are typically for the Hollywood-esque type recordings. And we definitely want to aspire to Hollywood-esque, but we don't necessarily need both the expense nor the post-production headaches that come along with someone's watch being able to be heard as part of the recording, because it's just such a high intensity mic. We always recommend doing a sound check before the recordings. Steve actually did a sound check with us before we all jumped on the call this morning. So it's just really an insurance policy. Anything can happen, and you can't guarantee that it'll be 100% okay, but definitely do that sound check every single time. When you can, break the recording into individual tracks. Zoom allows you to actually do that. And that allows, again, in post-production, if you're doing any editing, it allows you to actually edit each of the tracks separately versus having to try and extract all of the voices in order to be able to say, I need to take a hiccup that happened, from guest A, and you've got this blended track that has everyone speaking on the same one. So definitely do that if possible. Zoom actually does offer individual tracks. There are other online tools that do not allow for that. So if you can, definitely go with one that offers that. If you can't, my next recommendation is to actually go with a local recording. This is, again, just an insurance policy for you to be able to say, the streaming version went really well. We did the recording on Zoom. There was a disconnection with someone's internet. And oh no, it was a really great, part of the conversation. We don't have an opportunity to go back to them and get them to re-record. If you have that local copy that they've forwarded to you after you finished recording, you can actually use that as a backup. So I always say, if you don't have it, you'll need it. So always have it. So there's different ways that you can do that through a PC or through a Mac, and even through your smartphones. But definitely just always go with a local recording, and then just know your surroundings. Hopefully my cat doesn't stop meowing, but there's a good chance that you'll actually hear a cat in the background. We've had everything from parrots to someone eating Doritos to, fire engines and trains and stuff like that. If you are consistently recording in the same environment, your listeners will actually come to know those sounds that happen in the background that you may not have any control over. But if you are recording somewhere where there is an external noise, that's also an opportunity for you to be able to hear through the headphones. Is there something that I'm not hearing with my naked ear that I'm actually able to hear through the earbuds or the headphones as well? So you can take Doritos and parrots out in post-production, but if you can avoid that, we would recommend it. And then when we talk about editing, you don't have to go through the editing process. We obviously do a soup to nuts engagement with our clients, but it really comes down to, again, that consistency of audio quality, removing any content that, someone may have mentioned something that It's information that's not yet to be released publicly, or they said something incorrectly. We have, not very often, but we do have guests that will be super excited about a particular topic, and they'll accidentally release information on the recording that their company then turns around and says, you cannot say that, it cannot be released until X date. So we'll do one of two things. We'll actually remove it if we have to launch the show before that said date, and then we'll replace it after the fact with the original recording, or the original tidbit that was actually as a part of that original recording. But it's really just an opportunity for you to be able to go back and say, okay, now with fresh ears, we're going to be able to actually listen again, get the sign off from the guest if that's a part of your workflow. And so you just want to make sure, and that goes back to the individual tracks. If you have those individual tracks, you're going to be able to actually, it's going to be easier for you to remove any content.
Hey, Stacy, I want to make sure that we're aware of time. So
yes.
If you can hit the highlights of these quickly. Yes. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. So Stacy already talked about the duration of your show. Always allow your listeners to have an expected time frame to be able to listen to. You want to have those consistent episode elements. You layer in that music, whether it's licensed music or custom music that you have created. We talk about the voice of God. It's just the voiceover. You can use a professional voiceover artist or yourself as well. If you need a script, definitely make sure that that's available, the call to actions, and then you want to be able to slice in any ads, disclaimers, or service announcements that you want to actually have as part of the show for listeners to be able to go through as well. Distribution, you just want to be able to identify the audience, make sure that it's available everywhere, wherever a potential client or a listener may actually be introduced to you, whether it's through an email letter, newsletter, your website, or social media. Definitely make sure that your show is available in all of those outlets. We use a centralized content delivery network such as Libsyn. It makes it easier for us to be able to streamline. We always are looking for efficiencies, both in cost and time. Leverage that content as much as possible with that extended shelf life. Utilize the transcript that Stacy mentioned, especially for SEO. And then figure out how you might be able to reimagine that content. We actually often have end of season best ofs shows that we put together. It's a nice episode that puts a ribbon on the end of the season to be able to say, hey, here are the highlights. Now, if you're being introduced to us as a part of the best of show, now you get to go back and actually listen to the entire season.
My favorite is always the blooper reel. It's very fun. Okay, thank you. Sorry to rush you through that. So, hardware. I'm going to have you do something really quick about hardware, because the question that most people seem to have is, do I need the studio level equipment for recording? The short answer is no, right? The things to consider, obviously, your budget. So if you're a baller on a budget, then as Stacy said, you could probably find things through Amazon, or if you're just a baller, then go ahead and get that $2,000 microphone. You want to think about if you're going to be doing your podcast in person, or if people are going to be remote, and if you're going to be at home or in a studio, where you might be, and the audio quality goals. So if you're okay with sounding like you're in a bomb shelter in your backyard, then that is totally fine. That's your vibe. If you want to make sure that it sounds a bit more professional, then you need to take those things into consideration. For the equipment, as Stacy said, you need a microphone and ideally a stand, because I don't think you want to do the comedy thing or the Christina Aguilera microphone thing. You don't want the interference from the microphone to come into play. The headphones, yes, they make your hair look flat. However, you don't have to wear earrings, ladies. And you want to make sure that you have a consistent environment whenever possible. So for instance, don't record on Thursdays when it's trash day, like I did. So that is the soup and nuts about that. So the top takeaway that I want everyone to know is that when you do a podcast, understand that you are not going to be NPR or Dax Shepard yet. What do I mean by that? Do the podcast because it's something that you want to do. You feel like it's something that could help your business, but don't expect to suddenly get thousands and thousands and thousands of listens and viewers. And unless you want to turn really promoting your podcast into a full-time job, which is what many, many influencers do. So that's not going to happen immediately. However, you don't have to be Einstein to do this. You can do it, and just be prepared that you're not going to necessarily see the ROI immediately. But if you work it and you distribute it and you get it out there, then it can be really a great tool for your business. So the other top takeaways are making sure that you have an objective and goals of your podcast, that you determine the duration and cadence, how often you're going to release it, how long it's going to last, that you establish those foundational questions like where's it going to be, what's the equipment that you need, making sure that you have that consistent format and script. Always, 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 I'm using my hands, have a call to action. Make sure that you are inviting people to engage with you and with your business. And also consider advertising part of your format. If you have a business and you're doing a side podcast, then you can be your own sponsor. Or if you have partners in your business, go ahead and ask them if they want to participate and be a sponsor. They can buy essentially ad time, which helps defray the cost of your podcast. Win-win for everyone. Okay. Stacy Harris, is there anything that you want to bring up before we turn to Q&A?
No, just on that last point, Stacey, I love cross-pollination is a term. It's a bit of a buzz term, but it's really about how can you leverage your network in order to be able to say, hey, go ahead and listen to Don't Ask Me to Talk with Stacy Harris every Tuesday, or and then vice versa. And so you're looking at trades as well, because you don't necessarily have to purchase for a monetary value. There is value to actually partnering with other folks that have like shows in order for you to just kind of come together collaboratively and say, hey, we're in this together. We're just trying to, pay it forward. So there's definitely tremendous value when it comes to that.
Exactly, because suddenly their listeners become your listeners and vice versa.
And Dr. Carol actually mentioned that she's actually going to use her show to promote her book, which again is another great way. If you have multiple verticals for your business, it allows, Stacy, you had mentioned this before, allows multiple different points of entry for potential customers to be able to find you. Someone maybe introduce your book and then find your podcast, or listen to your podcast and find your book. So fantastic opportunity again to use this medium in order to be able to expand your business.
Awesome.
Right, let's get into some Q&A. We've got some really great questions here. Let's start with Cheryl's question. She says, I have a gift business where I ship corporate packages. Is talking about sending out gift packages something you do a podcast on? And I think this question comes up with a lot of people, like, is my business podcast worthy?
So I personally think that every business is podcast worthy because there's always something to talk about with that. So talking about topics from how you do your business. So how it is that you source items, how you determine the items that you're picking, the types of organizations. People think corporate gifts are best for bigger companies like a Microsoft, but how great is it when a small business takes the time to do these small items? And so being able to talk about the connection and being that personal touch through corporate gifts and the different ways that you can do it, the different items that can be sourced, how you can customize them, the feeling that it gives to people, having some of your clients come on and talk about how they've utilized your business or the unique ways that it's been used, or to have people come on as a testimonial to say, oh my gosh, I started sending out these brownies to my clients, and now I have a ton of people that, refer to me because they love that personal touch. So it becomes about really brainstorming the topics that you can cover, and you'll find there's a lot more than you think. If we can come up with 20 episodes of content about Brazilian waxing, you can come up with a bunch of topics about gift baskets and corporate gifts.
Well said. All right. Someone named Jenny is asking, what tips do you have for outlining topics or inviting guests to your podcast?
So I have a template that I use, and in the template, I have 3 columns. One is for topic ideas, one is for guest ideas, and one is for title ideas. that's because I tend to be somebody that loves coming up with titles. If I could just name nail polishes, that would be an amazing job for me. And so outlining ideas, once you come up with what your theme is, start thinking big, go to the ridiculous. And it's more fun that way. Even if your podcast is going to be more serious, still have fun and think big, and think about the topics, and then think about the people that you partner with. Think about the people that you'd have these conversations with. Make it as organic as possible so that the topics really feel organic to your business and what you do. And then as far as inviting guests on, people have that like, what, me? No, I couldn't. Everybody wants to have that moment with a microphone. And if you invite them in and you explain that it's a conversation, it is not something that they need to be intimidated by. You're inviting them into your home and you're making them feel comfortable as your guest, and you can disarm them. It's one of the things that when I did the Plateau Partners Pulse, which is the podcast that I produced for our BNI chapter, a lot of our members thought this is going to be boring. And I hosted it and they walked away saying, oh my gosh, that was really fun. And it was awesome to talk about. I didn't know that my industry could be interesting.
And to that, Stacy, casual yet informative is a term that we use a lot. It really and especially with when you're talking about your business, imagine having a conversation with your guest and presenting it to them like this: is we're sitting in a coffee shop and and people happen to overhear our conversation. It is approachable, and it's a way for your listener to kind of get comfortable and actually picture themselves sitting across the table from you having a cup of coffee as well. And so hopefully that eases their minds if there's any nerves that come along with being on mic. But quite often by the end of a recording session, people actually forget that there's a microphone in front of them as well. So that's always good. Really quickly, I do want to touch on the fact that we do have clients, and Stacy can speak to this too. We do have clients that actually do year-round episodes. Everything from weekly to bi-weekly. Every now and then it'll be monthly. But we actually have a majority of our clients, and our recommendation, especially when you're starting out, is to actually do kind of a Netflix approach where you actually do a 10 episode season, and then you can actually build the arc when it comes to what it is that you want to achieve over the course of that season. And it allows the listener to be able to say, I'm going to learn about the business, I'm going to learn about the people that are a part of the business, and I'm going to find out more information that I didn't even know. And regardless of when they start engaging with your services, by the end of that season, they're going to know about your business, about who you are, and why you're doing what you do. So don't feel like you have to commit this major time and money project. Look at it as a 10 episode season, and you've got a start and an end. And at the end of that season, you can reflect, evaluate, and pivot in order to be able to create additional seasons if it's the right thing for your business as well.
All right. These questions are getting longer and longer here with my scrolling here. So let's see if we can tackle a few all at once. I have three people, starting with Sandra, who say, how do you receive money or income from your podcast, passive income, or how do you monetize your podcast?
So I can talk about a couple of things, and then Stacy has some great ideas. So one, as I mentioned, you can get sponsorships that will help you defray the cost. So for instance, my podcast, I offer some of the folks that I know, anybody, frankly, if anybody wants to sponsor, I sell ad space and sponsorship for my podcast. And so I have a few different options for people. So that's a way that you can pay for the podcast. Then in terms of ongoing monetization, there are some passive income opportunities for you. And Stacy, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so the easiest one is actually affiliate marketing. And I know that has had a negative connotation tied to it over the years. However, there's nothing to be ashamed of when it comes to the promotion of products and services, as long as it's authentic in the recommendation. And so for the esthetician show that's being launched this weekend, she has products that are developed by her suppliers that she recommends to her clients in person. And so that is actually going to be a part of not only her show, but also her website. So when people go to learn more about her, the show, and what she offers, they're going to actually see that, oh, there's this certain type of lotion that she recommends for clients. If they were to go ahead and purchase that, there would be a very small commission that comes from that purchase. There's nothing wrong with actually utilizing the power of affiliate marketing to do that. But you really have to be authentic, because if you're not going to make that recommendation to someone sitting, across from you in your office, or who is a current client, then you should not be offering it to your listeners outside of that as well. So there's great programs that you can join. Amazon obviously having their own program, but there are other affiliate marketing companies like Rakuten Marketing. You may have actually seen some TV ads from them in the last 12 months. There's incredible opportunity there. Some people, I do know people that actually make upwards of $500,000 a year off of product recommendations through affiliate marketing programs. But don't look at it as your primary source of income unless you want it to be, but perhaps it actually can curb some of the costs that come along with the production of your show.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right. Heather has two good questions. As a new podcaster, how often should she be releasing episodes, and is there an ideal length per episode?
I'm glad you brought that up. So there is a sweet spot that Lens Group Media regularly recommends, which is about 22 to 25 minutes. And in an environment or a culture where, people like Snapchat and TikTok, younger generations have even a shorter attention span. So keep that in mind. So for instance, for the podcast that we keep talking about with the esthetician, we're doing shorter episodes. They run anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes, and they are not just actually audio, they're YouTube as well. And so what we've done is then we've doubled the amount that we're doing. So instead of doing the 10 at 25 minutes, we're doing 20 in the 12 to 15 minute range. So think about your topic. How long can you go talking about this? Who is your target audience? Are they going to listen for the length of a commute? Are they in for the long haul where they'll listen to it for an hour and you're telling a story? So I think thinking about your business and what it is that you're going to talk about and who your target audience is, that is going to dictate the length. But do keep in mind, unless you are talking about something that people can settle in and enjoy and they know what to expect, do keep in mind that people have a short attention span. Anything to add, Stacy?
Just with your younger audiences, I would definitely err on the side of shorter. We do have a new client that we're actually kicking off, and they have a post-college audience, new in career. And so we're actually tapping out at 8 to 12 minutes per episode, just simply because the audience data has actually told us that they need to keep it shorter and sweeter in order to be able to capture and maintain their engagement.
All right, I'm going to combine two questions, one from Brian and one from Bart. Part one says, how much does doing a podcast cost per hour, and how do you connect with a host company? And then Bart's question is, can you recommend a consultant I can hire to help produce and distribute a podcast?
So we'll start with Brian's question, and his question was about the person to distribute the company, and Stacy recommended Libsyn, and there are other companies as well. In terms of the cost, it really depends on how you do it. I sort of only half joking talk about how you could do the kiddie pool in the backyard and hose approach, where you're doing it at home, it's DIY, you're maybe somebody that has some technological skills, you know how to do this, you're comfortable with this, and you can make it happen. Or you can go the country club route, and for instance, Lens Group Media, they have enterprise clients that they produce shows, and that is much more high touch, white glove service. And then there's the middle of the road, where there are people out there, like, say, I don't know, myself, who works with clients and finds workarounds. For instance, I work with my local radio station. And with a lot of my clients, we actually do a live radio show that is converted to a podcast, and it keeps the cost down depending on the duration. It also keeps the editing down because you're live. And so it's a little bit like performance art. Whatever comes out in that period of time, it's there. And then in a few short hours, it's distributed to most of the major podcast platforms. And so the cost for that, it can be anywhere from, $100 an episode to several $100s an episode.
Okay, so if Bart is asking if he can hire and help produce and distribute a podcast, a consultant, is that either of you? Can they reach out to you for help?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll have everyone's email at the end. Get a little business going for you guys.
Great.
How do you break it down into tracks using Zoom? I know a lot of people using Zoom to create their podcasts.
Yeah, I can take this one, Stacy. It's actually the way that you set it up in Zoom, and what I can do is, Steve, if there is, you're going to be distributing the presentation afterwards.
Yes.
I can actually put together just a really quick cheat sheet on how to do that.
Okay.
But ultimately, if you're using something like Zoom, you can actually set it up. You always want to make sure you set it up before you start recording. And the pro tip on that from us is also that you make sure that you record a local copy of your Zoom. So we found that that's actually the better way to go. So again, I'll create a little cheat sheet and forward it off to Steve and Stacy so that can be distributed.
Fantastic. Two people are asking about microphones. Do you have one that you can recommend somewhere in the $100 to $200 range?
Yes, we actually do have a list of products that we recommend, and we can make that link available after the presentation. Again, you don't have to break the bank in order to be able to have great sounding, consistent quality.
Okay, so that's great. So what I'll do is, because other people are asking if they're going to be able to get a copy of this presentation, and yes, we will. So I will send a link for you to rewatch it. We'll send the PowerPoint and any goodies that Stacy wants to add into that email, and we'll send it out probably, I don't know how Stacy, how busy you are, if you can get it out later today, or if we could do it maybe over the weekend or Monday, whatever works for you.
Yep, today sounds
All
great.
right. So Bob and Tim both asked about licensing music, and can you use your own stuff, or how careful do you have to be with that?
So I know that with my show, for instance, I actually worked with Stacy and her partner, Dave, and I gave very, very, very specific instructions for my show. And I said, I want something that sounds a little bit of a cross between Kermit the Frog when he was doing his interviewing bit and Spinderella from Salt and Pepper. And
Who
Dave
I went to
delivered.
college with, go ahead.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, look at you, Steve.
I know.
So I had very specific, and that was a resource for me. I wanted something unique that was my own sound. That said, there is certainly a way to use music, but you do have to be careful about licensing. I believe, Stacy, you'll confirm this. You can only use a certain length of time for the music. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's some different criteria that you need to manage to if you're using someone else's music. There are some great services out there for existing music, so we can I can make sure that I include that in that cheat sheet as well. And to the custom, we do a lot of our clients custom music. Stacy is in a position to be able to not only use the music that we created for her show, but she can use it for speaking engagements, for events that she hosts. It is hers. She has full ownership of that, and so it doesn't have an expiration date, and so there's definitely an investment that needs to happen there, but the versatility of usage when it comes to your own, and just the peace of mind to know that you're not going to get in trouble because someone's going to come at you 3 years from now and say you can't use it anymore. So again, we do have clients that will actually go the pre-existing route, but we do have a lot of clients that actually want to just have that flexibility of being able to use their own music for a host of other reasons.
Okay. The excellent Dennis Charles is asking any tips for doing a joint podcast series with another business owner. He's tried talking on his own, and it lacks a little energy.
So I actually really recommend doing that. I have a client who is a psychotherapist, and in the beginning, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, he's really using it as a lead generator for speaking engagements. And the things that he's talking about are, they have more weight, they have more depth. However, if you're listening to that and the way that he was presenting it at first, it really was heavier. And so in the end, we ended up bringing on me to lighten it up so that there was that give and take and there was more layer and texture to the conversation. And so actually having a couple of people, thinking of it almost as a panel of sorts, is a really great way to have that texture. There's another podcast that I'm a part of. It's called Wisdom from the Wardrobe. It's with a client that talks about style and image consulting. And there's 4 people on that podcast. And there's all of these different perspectives about things. And so whether you do it like The Talk or The View or The Soup or whatever these shows are, where you have your consistent people that you do the podcast with, and again, partnering with another business owner or another power partner may be a way to help share the cost, and then bring in other people, bring in clients, bring in other partners, etc. And it definitely creates more energy and more interest.
Okay, great. A couple of people are asking about converting webcasts into podcasts.
I'll let Stacy speak to that.
Great.
Yeah, and there was a question earlier about, when you talk about podcasts, is it just audio only or does it include video as well? And the term podcast, it does apply to audio only. However, in this day and age, we're talking about media, right? Digital media and dynamic media. So there's definitely an opportunity to be able to actually take existing content like a webinar or a previous video that has been created and actually create the audio only version of that. And so that allows your consumer, your listener, to actually choose how they actually want to engage with your content. Do they have time to sit in front of their phone or their laptop and watch the content? Or are they, they're like, I've got an hour, I've got to walk the dog. I'm going to take this time to be able to actually listen to this, but I'm not going to be able to, walk the dog and watch a video at the same time. So really see it as an opportunity for you to be able to go, does this content that I've done in a different medium, can it actually be applied into audio only? Now, if it's very visual heavy, or if you've got an interactive side to the content, you definitely want to make sure that it's not going to confuse your listener if they're not able to see what it is that you're referring to. But again, we've got clients that will actually do video and they'll actually distribute the audio only through a podcast, but also make the video available through YouTube on their website, etc. So definitely reutilize that content that you already have if it's applicable and not going to create any confusion for your listener base.
Okay, great. Do we recommend Audacity for those who are doing ongoing podcasts for editing?
The short answer is yes. Thanks, Shannon, for bringing that up. Audacity is definitely one that we utilize and recommend for clients as well.
All right. We are going to go, wow, it's already 12:54. We only got 6 minutes left. We're going to the top of the hour. Everyone is still on, so great Q&A session here. Do guests ever get paid for appearing on a podcast?
So in my experience, no. Stacy may have a different experience. Typically, for instance, with my show, I am not interested in paying for guests to be on the show. I want them to be on the show because they want to be on the show. And in a way, the way that they're getting paid is I'm giving them an opportunity to talk about their business, to promote what it is they want to promote. And I am giving them airtime, which is very valuable time. And especially with a podcast, with my radio show, sure, that's an hour of airtime. But with my podcast, that is indefinite airtime. So I don't think it's something that's necessary. However, would I maybe pay, I don't know, Dax Shepard to come on my show? I mean, maybe. I did buy a cameo from Rob Bass, and so that he would promote my show. So in theory, I sort of paid a guest. But Stacy, do you have a different answer to that?
We typically do not see payment for guests to turn up. It's definitely up to the individual show owner. But as Stacy said, it's free advertising. And so it's an opportunity, even if you're like, I'm not sure if I actually want to have my own show, be a podcast guest. Go out there and take a look at all the podcasts that are out there that align with your business and approach them. I can tell you right now, after being in this business for for many years now, and we constantly get people contacting us like, I want to be on this show, I want to be on that show, do you want to come on my show? And so as you listen to today and trying to figure out whether it's the right thing for your business to invest the time and money, actually dip your toe in and get on Stacy's show, get on, look in the industry, go to Apple, and figure out what shows are out there, and just it's a numbers game. Reach out to those folks and say, hey, I've got something to say, and then take a listen. And if you like it and if you're comfortable with it, then you might dip another toe into actually exploring to do your own show.
Yeah, I did 2 podcasts last week that I never thought I would do, and they were completely different topics. But every time you talk to someone, they say, hey, you know what, that was great. Would you like to come on mine? And vice versa. I think you have to use it as leverage for those people who say, do you pay for anything for it? No, but you get exposure to all of my listeners. And I think that's the advantage.
Well, and Steve, once those episodes get released, you'll likely see an incremental lift in your website traffic, because people will actually, the listeners of that show will actually look to find you. And so keep an eye out for that as well. If you are a guest on a show, once that episode has been released, just go and see. If you see that little blip in your website traffic, it means that you've hit the mark with that listener base as well.
I have a text here to ask about including show notes, and where do you put them, on the website or on Libsyn?
Yes.
Both, right?
Yeah. So typically what you do is some people just number their episodes, or they'll put a date with their episode. I'm a big fan, as I mentioned earlier, of naming my episodes. And then you basically take some quick show notes so that you're doing the highlights, and you can have that on your, let's say you have a landing page for your podcast, you can put it there so that it is there. You would put it on Libsyn, you would put it in, you would put it anywhere so that people have a very brief synopsis of what it is that you cover in that particular episode.
And that'll also help with your SEO, with your keywords.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, and now Erin says, this is great, by the way, and then asks, what's the best way to get engagement for a podcast other than direct social media posts?
Well, I think that it is about sharing with your network. I mean, we are part of BNI, right? So it is your network, and asking people to share. So for instance, when I did the podcast for the Plateau Partners, what I essentially did is gave all of the members an opportunity to be on the podcast. I ended up getting 30 people that were interested, interviewed them, gave them all their opportunity, and then shared it individually. Now you have 31 people that are sharing it with their network. Then you have the 50 some odd people that are in our chapter that are hopefully collectively sharing that. And it does become work. I'm not going to pretend that you just put it out there and it's great. It is definitely about, having people, talking it up, networking with them, having it really easy for people to find the podcast so that it's not a heavy lift. I have a QR code on my business card that can take people directly to that information.
All right, we are out of time, except one last question, because 3 people are asking it, and that is just a podcast or a video vlog cast? So video plus audio.
So one thing that I am intrigued by, and I am going to start actually be researching, is doing live streaming actually through Twitch or Discord or something like that. Because again, thinking of your business as a home and your website, thinking of all the different entrances through which you can go to. So if you have a podcast that you can convert to then a blog, and you also have the live stream or a Facebook Live, although those are not nearly as successful as they used to be. So certainly the video component, I think, is really key. Stacy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and it's just, again, making sure that you're offering the consumer the opportunity to decide how they want to consume the content, whether video or so. If you are doing video, we always recommend actually doing both, extracting the audio and delivering it via podcast, and then keeping the video available as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We went about 15 minutes over, but everyone hung on with us. So great questions. If you did not get your question answered, please reach out to Stacy H or Stacy H, as I like to say, whichever Stacy you prefer, and you will get your question answered. And we look forward to sending you out some really great support materials for this webinar. Both Stacys, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.